As a father, I can tell you this. If you try to make something easier for your kid, um, then that's fine the first time. But if you keep making it easy and worse, keep making it easier and easier, your child becomes more and more dependent on you to do that thing. They keep expecting you to come in and rescue them, or at least give them a hand, or maybe just do it for them. Uh, the white liberal really enjoys being that hand holder because it makes them feel superior. And ultimately, they have an insecurity about being white. And so they want to feel superior to the other races by being the hand holder and by making sure that the other races must continue to rely on them for that hand holding. And that, I think, is why Nixon really launched affirmative action. It was him who, without the Dr. King, nor Malcolm X, nor Bobby Seale, nor Angela Davis, I don't remember Stokely Carmichael, or even later on in the years, no one like KRS-One, or even Cornel West. None of these people were out on the streets demanding affirmative action, but the very powerful people, the grassroots, weren't screaming about it. In fact, in the most recent California referendum, Latinos who would have benefited greatly from affirmative action voted 50-50, for and against it. That was with the pro-affirmative action groups having, an order of magnitude more in funding than the basically the non-existent anti-affirmative action groups funding. So the grassroots have never really been demanding this, but the people who have power, the boards of directors, the boards of regents at universities, the corporate chiefs, the top politicians, we're talking about the Bidens and the Obamas and the George Bush Juniors of the world. They've been pushing this agenda on people of color for generations. And after 3 generations of this, just making it easier and easier and easier for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans to get into college and to get a job, and to even get into the civil service, become a postman, or become a fireman or a policeman, or just be a paper pusher at the city or at the state or county. All these jobs, or to be an engineer at a high-tech company, and so on and so forth. The people in power have just made it easier and easier for Black Americans and Hispanics and Native Americans to get these jobs and to get into college and get into graduate school, law school, medical school. After 3 generations of this, they have succeeded in making Black Americans and Hispanics dependent on the hand-holding and the salvation of the great white liberal. And this only in the long term has made, especially, I think, certain groups, I'm not going to go into it by name, certain groups weaker than they would have been, if someone like Malcolm X had lived, and of course, the FBI likely killed him. The FBI probably had a hand in killing Dr. King as well. But if Mr. X had lived, he would have been completely against all of this. He always said to beware of the so-called help from the left. And Public Enemy said the same thing. Be careful. Be cautious. Be wary. Be suspicious when the help is coming from the left, because it is the guilty white conscience that will ultimately sink, or ultimately has sunk many large numbers of people of color, because they made people of color dependent on those white liberals to make it easier for them. And the worst part of it is it's gotten easier and easier. So if it started out really easy, let's say in 1974, for an African American to get into, say, any state college in America, and then it got harder and harder, that would actually be that would have made more sense, because the degree of just disgusting and sickening and crippling racism that existed in the late 60s and even into the early 70s, would have made that would have made more sense back then. And then when you make it harder and harder, once you have an easy start, it creates a different mindset, less dependency. It creates a mindset of, let me try harder, let my community try harder. Oh, I have to try harder than my older brother did in order to get into college. But instead, the system has made it easier and easier, so that at this point, for an Asian, the average Asian is scoring like hundreds of points higher on these SATs and other exams than certain other groups. And what's interesting too, though, is that the people who have benefited the most from affirmative action are white people, because they've taken, let's say, they take 10 opportunities away from Asians at an engineering school or at a law school, or just in undergraduate programs at a state college. They take 10 away from Asians, and then they give 4 away to Hispanics and blacks. So they netted 6 extra opportunities, 6 extra seats at those law schools and dental schools and medical schools and computer programming programs and so on and so forth. This is how white people have benefited, and that is why white liberals, in part, have clung to affirmative action, claiming that they are the salvation of blacks and Hispanics. Meanwhile, the actual grassroots, not realizing that they have become more and more dependent on these white savior, self-declared white saviors, have really lost out, because when you basically get an entire group to stop studying so much, you have made them less keen, less clever, less financially sound. Yes, they might be able to get into college easier, but the graduation rate is lower. So more people are strapped with debt while not having a college degree. Or they do get their degree, but because they got in with lower standards, and they were given lower standards from K through 12 all the way through, probably through graduate school, and then they get a job, and they perform poorly in that job because they've been poorly trained, because they've had their standards lowered for 3 generations. What kind of life is that? I mean, in the back of their mind, they know there's something wrong, but they don't want to admit it to themselves. When they're the worst person on their team at a high-tech firm, and they can't be fired because of their race, but all their colleagues, they can tell, kind of look down on them and they know this person is on the team because of their race. So people have definitely taken a hit in their dignity and their life quality as a result of all this so-called white salvation. And yet, and the people who have to pay the highest price as far as economic and dignity is concerned are blacks and Asians, because it is humiliating to be forced to try to perform a lot better than a white person in order to get the same job or to get the same seat in a college. That is humiliating. And of course, some people don't survive that. Some people kill themselves because they can't handle the pressure of constantly having to perform way better than, an excellent white student or an excellent white worker. They have to, just like in Harold and Kumar, Harold was forced by the white boys in his company to work longer and harder for the same level of pay and a whole lot more humiliation and degradation. He suffered through. So I better end it here. It's been 11 minutes already. Good luck to all. And yes, the affirmative action has not ended in colleges. They just found different ways of applying it to keep the Asians out, from zip code discrimination to named, if they can see that you have an Asian name, or, people are mentioning their race in their college essays. So, the colleges can tell at least who is not Asian. And there's just all sorts of ways that they're still keeping the Asians out of college despite the Supreme Court ruling. So change your name to a non-Asian name and never ever mention your race when you apply to college if you are Asian, especially if you're Chinese, Indian, Korean, Japanese, or Taiwanese, possibly Bangladeshi, Pakistani. I wish you luck.